At the family dinner, my daughter-in-law mocked me. "This old woman knows nothing. She just signs everything I tell her." Those words echoed in my ears long after they were spoken, yet I remained silent. I sat at the table, my hands trembling slightly as I carefully placed the fork beside my plate. No one came to my defense. Not Jacob, my son. Not anyone. I wasn't sure if they didn't hear her or simply didn't care. I wasn't sure if they were afraid of Rachel or if they too believed I was just some burden to be dealt with. My heart sank, but I didn't let it show. I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of seeing my pain. My 68 years on this earth had taught me the value of silence, especially in moments like this. But deep inside, a storm was brewing. For years, I had silently accepted their little dismissals, their quiet judgments, and Rachel's constant attempts to undermine me. I had always tried to keep the peace. But this was different. This wasn't a small thing I could brush off. I could feel the walls of my home growing colder, and I could no longer pretend that everything was fine. I had raised Jacob with love and care, and yet here I was, treated like an outsider in my own family. I glanced at Jacob, hoping for some sign of support, but his eyes were downcast, focused on his plate, avoiding mine. Rachel, on the other hand, wore a smug smile. She knew she had won. She knew she had control. And that was the most painful part of all. I had spent my life building this family, nurturing it, keeping it together. And now, it seemed like it was falling apart before my very eyes. The laughter, the chatter, the warmth that once filled this room was now replaced with a silence that threatened to swallow me whole. I wanted to speak up. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I focused on the plate in front of me, pretending to be interested in the meal, pretending nothing had changed. The truth was, nothing would ever be the same again. My mind raced, thinking of all the times I had been overlooked, dismissed, or ignored. It wasn't just Rachel. It was Jacob too, and all. The years I had spent being the one to keep everything together. And now, when I needed them most, they had turned their backs on me. I could feel my heart breaking a little more with each passing second. How had it come to this? How had they become so cold, so indifferent? But most importantly, what was I going to do about it? I had spent too many years letting them walk all over me. Too many years being the one to clean up their messes, to smooth over their arguments, to make sure they were happy. But no more. Rachel's words had cut deep, but they had also awakened something in me. A sense of determination I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't going to sit back and let them dictate my life any longer. The time for silence had passed, and when I finally spoke, I would make sure they knew exactly what I thought of them. But not yet. Not now. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to feel the anger bubbling inside me. It wasn't loud or explosive. It was cold, calculated, and full of quiet resolve. I would get my justice, but I would do it on my own terms. I spent the rest of the evening in silence, the weight of Rachel's words lingering in the air like smoke. The laughter and conversation around the table felt distant, as though I were no longer a part of it. I tried to eat, but the food tasted bland, like cardboard. My mind kept drifting back to what had happened earlier. Rachel's mocking words, Jacob's silence, the way everything had shifted in the blink of an eye. I had always known Rachel didn't like me, but to hear her speak to me like that, in front of my son, was a betrayal I wasn't sure I could recover from. But I wouldn't let them see how much it hurt. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break down. I sat there, my hands folded in my lap, my heart heavy, but my face a mask of composure. I could feel Rachel's eyes on me, and I knew she was waiting for me to react, to show weakness. But I wasn't going to give her that. I had learned long ago that silence could be more powerful than any words. And for now, silence was all I could offer. The evening dragged on, and eventually, everyone began to leave. Jacob barely said a word to me, his gaze shifting uncomfortably as he grabbed his coat. Rachel, of course, was the first to leave, practically pulling Jacob out the door. I watched them go, feeling the emptiness of the house closing in on me. I wondered if they even cared that I was alone, that I had spent the entire evening pretending nothing was wrong, pretending that everything was fine. But deep down, I knew the truth. They didn't care. They never had. As the door shut behind them, I let out a long, shaky breath. The silence was deafening. I stood in the doorway for a moment, my hand on the doorframe, as if holding onto the last vestiges of the life I once knew. I could feel my heart breaking, but I refused to let the tears come. I had spent my entire life giving everything to my family, but it was never enough. The years of love, sacrifice, and dedication had all been washed away in a single moment. And now, I was left with nothing but the hollow ache in my chest. I walked back into the kitchen, my steps heavy with the weight of everything I had just realized. I turned off the lights and started cleaning up, moving mechanically, as if I were on autopilot. The plates, the glasses, the silverware, they all felt like strangers in my hands. I had spent so many years caring for this house, making it a home for my family, but now it felt cold, empty, and foreign. I set the last plate in the dishwasher and closed it with a soft click. I stood there for a moment, my hands resting on the counter, staring at nothing in particular. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind, each one more painful than the last. But through it all, one thought stood out above the rest. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit back and let them treat me like this. I couldn't let Rachel think she had won. I had spent my entire life being the one who held the family together. I had always been the one to smooth things over, to make sure everyone was happy. But now it was my turn. I wasn't going to let them push me out, not without a fight. I may have been silent tonight, but that didn't mean I would stay silent forever. It wasn't just about the words Rachel had said. It was about everything, about how they had used me, taken advantage of me, and discarded me when I was no longer useful to them. I wouldn't let them get away with it. Not this time. I knew that I had to act quickly before they had a chance to push me even further out of the picture. But for now, I would wait. I would watch, listen, and plan. I would bide my time until the right moment came. And when it did, I would make sure they knew exactly who they had underestimated. I wasn't just some old woman who didn't understand. I had lived a full life, and I wasn't done yet. I may have been silent tonight, but I wasn't going to stay silent forever. I woke up the next morning with a heavy heart, the events of last night replaying over and over in my mind. The silence of the house seemed even more oppressive now. I had spent the entire evening trying to keep my composure, but as the hours ticked by, I felt the weight of Rachel's words crushing me from all sides. I had always tried to be the peacekeeper, the one who held everything together, but last night made it clear that the family I had worked so hard to build no longer cared about me. I had been reduced to an invisible figure in my own home, a mere bystander in the life I had helped create. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at my reflection. The woman looking back at me was still familiar, but there was a sharpness in her eyes now, a resolve I hadn't seen before. I wasn't going to let Rachel win. I had spent too many years being the one to smooth things over, to keep the peace, to make sure everyone was happy. But that was over now. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me anymore. I wasn't going to let her dictate my life. I took a deep breath and turned away from the mirror. It was time to start making some changes. The first thing I needed to do was figure out what Rachel was up to. She had always been manipulative, but last night, she had taken it too far. I needed to know what she was planning, and I needed to find a way to stop her. I spent the next few days keeping a close eye on her, watching for any signs of trouble. I noticed that she was spending more time at the house, always making sure to be in the right place at the right time, as if she were trying to control every aspect of the family's life. I didn't trust her, not one bit. I could feel her eyes on me whenever I entered the room, and it made my skin crawl. She was watching me, waiting for me to slip up, but I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. I had learned the hard way that silence was my weapon. The more Rachel pushed, the more I would hold back, the more I would watch and wait. I wasn't going to make any rash decisions, not yet. I needed to gather more information, to see just how far she was willing to go. The more I observed her, the more I realized how manipulative she truly was. She had this way of getting Jacob to do whatever she wanted, making him believe that everything she did was for the good of the family. But I could see through her. I had lived through enough to know when someone was being dishonest, and Rachel was no exception. I could feel the tension between us growing with each passing day, but I refused to let her see how much it bothered me. I wasn't going to let her see me sweat. One afternoon, I found myself alone in the kitchen, washing the dishes, when Rachel walked in. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there in the doorway, watching me. I could feel her gaze on me, cold and calculating. I didn't acknowledge her presence, focusing instead on the task at hand. The silence between us stretched on until Rachel finally spoke. "You know," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "you really should think about moving out." This house is too big for you, and you're just holding Jacob back. I froze, the dish in my hand slipping from my grasp and clattering into the sink. I turned slowly to face her, my heart pounding in my chest. What did you say? I asked, my voice calm but steady. Rachel smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I just think it would be better for everyone if you found a place more suited to your needs. You know, somewhere with people your own age. You don't want to be a burden on Jacob. Her words hit me like a slap in the face, but I didn't flinch. I wasn't going to let her see how much she hurt me. I'm not a burden, I said, my voice low but firm. And this is still my home. Rachel's smile faded, replaced by a look of annoyance. It's not really your home anymore, is it? She replied, her tone sharp. Jacob and I have been talking, and we both think it's time for you to move on. I felt my blood run cold, but I didn't let it show. I had known this was coming, but hearing it out loud still stung. I had spent decades in this house, building a life with Noelle, raising Jacob, and now they were trying to take it all away from me. But I wasn't going to let that happen. Not without a fight. I turned away from her, my back straight and my hands clenched into fists. I'm not going anywhere, I said, my voice quiet but filled with determination. And you're not going to push me out. Rachel stared at me for a moment, her eyes narrowing as if she were trying to gauge whether I meant what I said. I knew she didn't expect me to fight back. She thought I was weak, that I would just roll over and let her take control. But she was wrong. I wasn't going to let her tear apart everything I had worked for. The silence between us stretched on for a long moment. But this time, it was different. This time, I wasn't the one feeling small and insignificant. This time, I had the power. Rachel finally turned and left, but not before giving me one last cold look. I stood there for a moment, my heart still racing, but I didn't feel fear. I felt something else, something stronger. I felt the first stirrings of defiance. I wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not ever. I spent the next few days in a haze, the events of the last few weeks weighing heavily on my mind. Every time I walked through the house, I could feel Rachel's presence looming over me, even though she wasn't around. I could feel her eyes on me, even when she wasn't there. It was as if she had already won, as if she had already pushed me to the edge and was waiting for me to fall. But I wasn't going to fall. Not yet. I wasn't going to let her think she had beaten me. The house had always been my refuge, my sanctuary. It was where I had raised my son, where Noelle and I had built our life together. But now, it felt like a prison. Every corner seemed to remind me of the life I had lost, and every step I took felt heavier than the last. I found myself questioning everything. Had I really spent all these years caring for my family, only to be pushed aside when I was no longer useful? Was I just a burden to them, something to be discarded once they had no more use for me? I couldn't help but wonder if I had failed somewhere, if I had somehow let them down. But I knew better than to fall into that trap. I had given my heart and soul to this family, and I wasn't about to let them take that away from me. I spent my days watching Rachel and Jacob, trying to find any sign of weakness, anything that would give me the leverage I needed to turn the tide in my favor. It wasn't easy. Rachel was always one step ahead, always making sure to keep me in the dark about what was really going on. But I could see through her. I could see the way she manipulated Jacob, the way she twisted everything to suit her own needs. I watched as she controlled every conversation, every decision, like she was the one who held all the power. And I knew it was only a matter of time before I would have to make my move. I wasn't sure what that move would be yet, but I knew I couldn't wait forever. The thought of sitting idly by while Rachel took over my family made my blood boil. But I also knew that I couldn't rush into anything. I had to be patient. I had to wait for the right moment. It was during one of these quiet moments of reflection that I realized something. The way Jacob was acting, the way he was avoiding me. He wasn't doing it because he didn't love me. He was doing it because he was afraid. He was afraid of Rachel. He was afraid of losing her, afraid of standing up to her. And that, I realized, was where I could make a difference. I wasn't going to fight Rachel head on, at least not yet. But I could fight for Jacob. I could fight to remind him of the mother he once knew, the woman who had always been there for him, no matter what. I could make him remember who I was and what I had done for him. And that, I decided, was where I would start. I began to reach out to Jacob in subtle ways, small gestures that showed him I was still here, still his mother, still the person who loved him unconditionally. I sent him texts, reminding him of old memories, of the times when we were close. I called him, just to check in, to see how he was doing. At first, he didn't respond. The distance between us seemed insurmountable, but I didn't give up. I knew that if I kept reaching out, eventually he would come around. And slowly, he did. He started responding to my messages, started answering my calls. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It was a crack in the wall that Rachel had built between us, a small opening that I could work with. I kept my distance, not wanting to push too hard, but I made it clear that I wasn't going anywhere. I was still his mother, and I was still here, waiting for him to remember who I was. Meanwhile, Rachel kept up her usual act, pretending like everything was fine, pretending like she was the perfect daughter-in-law. But I could see through her facade. I could see how she controlled everything, how she manipulated Jacob into doing what she wanted. And it made my blood boil. I wasn't going to let her continue to have this power over my family. I wasn't going to let her win. But for now, I had to be patient. I had to keep playing the game, keep waiting for the right moment to strike. And when that moment came, I would be ready. I wasn't just going to sit back and let Rachel take everything from me. Not without a fight. It had been weeks since I first reached out to Jacob, and though the distance between us had begun to shrink, I still felt the weight of Rachel's control over him. Every step I took towards him felt like a battle, but I knew I had to keep going. I had to make him see me for who I truly was, not just the shadow of a mother he had forgotten. But as much as I tried, there was always that wall between us, built by Rachel, brick by brick. One afternoon, I was sitting in the living room, the sunlight streaming through the windows, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. As I opened the door, I was surprised to see my niece, Emily, standing there. She had always been a sweet girl, the daughter of my sister, Ruth, and she had always been close to Jacob when he was younger. "Aunt Susan," she said, her voice warm, "can we talk?" I stepped aside to let her in, my heart pounding with curiosity. Emily had always been a calm, steady presence in our family, but lately, I hadn't heard much from her. She had been busy with her own life, but I was glad to see her now. "What's going on?" I asked, leading her to the couch. "You look like you have something important to say." Emily hesitated for a moment, as though weighing her words carefully. "It's about Jacob and Rachel," she said quietly. My heart skipped a beat. "What about them?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Emily looked around the room, her eyes lingering on the family photos on the wall, as if she were searching for the right words. "I've been worried about him," she said finally. "I've seen how Rachel has been treating you, how she's been pulling him away from everyone. He's not himself anymore, Aunt Susan. It's like she's completely taken over his life." My stomach tightened. This was exactly what I had been feeling, but hearing someone else say it out loud made it even more real. "I know," I whispered. "I've been trying to reach him, but it's like she has him under her thumb. He doesn't even see it." Emily nodded, her expression sad. "I've tried talking to him, but it's like he doesn't want to hear it. He's so wrapped up in Rachel's world that he's lost sight of everything else. I don't know what to do anymore," I confessed. "I've given him everything, Emily. I've spent my whole life making sure he had what he needed. But now it feels like he's just slipping away." Emily reached out and placed her hand over mine, her touch gentle but firm. "You're not alone, Aunt Susan. I'm here, and I know others who are worried too. Jacob needs to see the truth, and maybe it's time we help him open his eyes. You don't have to fight this battle alone." Her words struck a chord deep within me. I had been carrying this burden by myself for so long, but maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to. Emily was right. I couldn't do this alone, but with her help, with the support of others who cared about Jacob, maybe we could reach him. I wasn't going to let Rachel tear my family apart without a fight. As I sat there with Emily, I realized something. I had been waiting for Jacob to come to me, but maybe it was time to take matters into my own hands. I had to be the one to make him see the truth, no matter what it took. I wasn't going to let Rachel win. Not while I still had breath in my body. "Thank you, Emily," I said, my voice filled with gratitude. "I don't know what I would do without you." She smiled warmly, squeezing my hand. "You're stronger than you think, Aunt Susan. You've got this." I nodded, feeling a flicker of hope for the first time in weeks. I wasn't going to let Rachel's manipulation destroy my family. I wasn't going to let her win. The fight wasn't over. It had just begun. I spent the next few days trying to gather my thoughts and formulate a plan. Emily had given me the push I needed, but I still had to figure out how to approach Jacob. I couldn't force him to see the truth. He had to come to it on his own. But I could create a space where he could hear me, where he could listen without Rachel's influence clouding his judgment. The house had become a battleground, but I knew the only way to fight was to stay calm, to remain patient. I spent my days keeping to myself, reading old books, looking through photo albums, and remembering the days when Jacob and I were close. The pictures in the album told a different story, a story of love, of trust, of a bond that had once been unbreakable. I wondered when it had all started to change. When had Rachel come into our lives and turned everything upside down? It was hard to pinpoint exactly when things had started shifting. At first, it had been small things, little changes in Jacob's behavior, his subtle avoidance of me, the way Rachel started making decisions without consulting anyone. But those small changes had snowballed over time, and now here I was, on the outside looking in, watching as she slowly took control of my son's life. One evening, just as the sun was setting and the room was bathed in a soft golden light, Jacob walked into the house. He had his coat on, and his face was drawn, as though he had been carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. I didn't say anything at first. I didn't want to push him. I just waited, watching him as he stood by the door. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt heavy, thick with unspoken words. Finally, Jacob cleared his throat. "Mom, can we talk?" It was the first time in weeks that he had asked to talk to me. My heart skipped a beat, and I nodded, gesturing for him to sit down. He took a deep breath and sat across from me, his eyes avoiding mine. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that's been happening lately," he began, his voice low and hesitant. "I know I've been distant, but it's not what you think. I wanted to reach out to him, to tell him everything, to make him understand. But I knew better. I had to let him speak, to hear what he had to say. I've been trying to keep everything together," he continued. "But Rachel, she's been so upset. She doesn't understand why you're still here, why you haven't moved out yet. And I've just been stuck in the middle." His words stung, but I forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't let him see how much it hurt. "Jacob, I'm not asking for much," I said quietly, my voice steady. "I just want to be treated with respect. I want to be part of this family again. But every day, it feels like I'm being pushed further and further away." He looked up at me then, his eyes filled with confusion and guilt. "I know, Mom. I've seen how she's treated you, but I'm stuck. I don't know what to do." I could see the conflict in his eyes. He didn't want to hurt me, but he was afraid of Rachel. He was afraid of losing her, afraid of standing up to her. And that was where I had to step in. "Jacob, you don't have to choose between us," I said gently. "But you need to see what's happening. You need to see the truth." He didn't answer at first, and for a moment, I thought he was going to pull away again. But then, slowly, he nodded. "I'll think about what you said, Mom," he murmured. "I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose everything we had." I reached out and placed my hand on his, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "You don't have to lose anything, Jacob, but you have to make a choice. You can't keep ignoring what's happening right in front of you." He nodded again, a look of determination crossing his face. "I'll talk to Rachel," he said. "I don't know how, but I will." I could see the hesitation in his eyes, but I also saw a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I had finally reached him. As Jacob left the room that evening, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in weeks: hope. It was a small step, but it was a step forward. I wasn't going to give up on him. Not now, not ever. I would fight for my son, for the family we used to be, and I would make sure Rachel didn't win. It was time to turn the tables. It was time to take back what was mine. The following days were tense. Jacob had promised to talk to Rachel, but I wasn't sure what to expect. I couldn't help but wonder if he would really stand up to her or if, like always, he would back down under her influence. It wasn't just the power she had over him. It was the way she could twist everything, make him feel guilty for even questioning her. I couldn't let him be swept up in her lies again. I couldn't sit back and watch as Rachel slowly erased me from Jacob's life. I needed to act. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had been too passive. I had let Rachel run the show for too long. It was time for me to take control, to find a way to show Jacob the truth without alienating him further. One evening, after dinner, when the house had quieted down and the last of the dishes had been put away, I found myself sitting alone in the living room. The silence around me felt suffocating, but it also gave me time to think. Time to plan. The phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. I looked at the caller ID. It was Jacob. My heart skipped a beat. I quickly picked up the phone, my voice steady but filled with anticipation. Jacob, I said. Mom, I need to talk to you, he said, his voice tense. Can you meet me tomorrow? Somewhere private. I could hear the urgency in his voice, and my heart raced. Of course, I replied. Where do you want to meet? I'll come by your place tomorrow morning. Around 10, he asked. Okay, I'll be here, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I hung up the phone and sat there for a moment, my mind racing. What had happened? What had Rachel said? Was he finally ready to see the truth? I couldn't help but feel a surge of hope. But I knew better than to get my hopes up too high. I couldn't count on Rachel's words anymore. She had lied to him for so long that I had no idea if he could even see the truth anymore. The next morning, I paced the living room, waiting for Jacob to arrive. My thoughts were a blur, full of doubt and hope, frustration and determination. When the doorbell rang, I jumped, my heart pounding. I opened the door to find Jacob standing there, his face strained, his hands shoved deep into his coat pockets. Come in, Jacob, I said, stepping aside. He walked in and sat down. On the couch, his eyes fixed on the floor. Mom, he began, his voice low. I've been thinking a lot about everything. I know I haven't been there for you. And I know I've let Rachel push you away. My heart leapt at the words, but I held back. I couldn't let myself get emotional just yet. Jacob, I said softly, I don't need you to apologize. I just need you to see what's happening. Rachel is manipulating you. She's been controlling everything, and it's tearing our family apart. He looked up at me then, his eyes filled with confusion. I don't know if I can see it, he admitted. Every time I try to stand up to her, she makes me feel guilty. She makes me feel like I'm betraying her. I sighed, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. She's a master at making you feel that way. But Jacob, she's not the one who has your best interests at heart. I do. I always have. Jacob's eyes filled with uncertainty, but he didn't look away. I know, Mom. I know you've always been there for me. But it's hard, you know? She's been there for me too. She's been helping me with everything. I leaned forward, my voice firm but kind. She's helping you with what exactly? Making you believe that you don't need your mother anymore? Making you think I'm just a burden? Jacob shook his head. No, it's not like that. But she's been so convincing. She says I need to focus on my future, on my life with her. She says you can't be a part of that anymore. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, but I refused to let it show. I had to be strong, for both of us. Jacob, I said, my voice shaking slightly. I'm not asking you to choose between us. I'm asking you to see the truth. I'm asking you to remember who you are, who we are, and what you're giving up. He looked at me, his expression softening. I don't want to lose you, Mom, he whispered. I don't want to lose what we had. I reached out and placed my hand on his. Then don't let her take it from you. Don't let her win. Jacob nodded, his face serious. I'll talk to her. I'll tell her what I need. I'll make her see that this isn't working. I smiled, a small but genuine smile. That's all I've ever wanted, Jacob. For you to stand up for yourself. For you to see the truth. He hugged me then, and for the first time in a long while, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. There was still so much work to be done, but this was the first real step forward. I wasn't alone anymore, and I wasn't going to let Rachel tear my family apart. Not without a fight. The next few days passed in a strange kind of silence. Jacob had kept his word, and I could see the change in him, though it was subtle. He wasn't as distant, his eyes less clouded with the guilt Rachel had planted in his mind. I knew he was struggling, but the fact that he was trying to make things right, that he was seeing through Rachel's manipulation, gave me hope. I had to stay patient. I had to trust that this wasn't just a phase, that Jacob was finally waking up to the reality of what was happening in our family. I spent my days doing what I could to maintain a sense of normalcy. I kept the house in order, made my tea in the mornings, and tried to occupy my mind with small tasks. But it was impossible to ignore the tension that still hung in the air. Every time Rachel came by, I could feel her eyes on me, measuring, assessing. It was as if she was waiting for me to make a move, to show my hand. But I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. I would wait until Jacob was ready to confront her, until he saw the truth for what it was. One afternoon, after a long day of sorting through old family photos, I sat down at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, but the silence was broken by the sound of the front door opening. I looked up, my heart skipping a beat as I saw Jacob walk into the room. His expression was serious, but there was a hint of relief in his eyes. "Mom," he said softly, "we need to talk." My heart raced, but I remained calm. "Of course, Jacob," I replied, motioning for him to sit. He hesitated for a moment before sitting across from me, his hands clasped in front of him. "I had a long talk with Rachel," he began, his voice low, "and I finally told her how I felt. I told her that I couldn't keep living like this, with everything she's been doing." My breath caught in my throat. I had known Jacob had it in him, but hearing him say it aloud was more than I could have hoped for. "And?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "She didn't take it well," Jacob admitted, his gaze dropping to the table. "She tried to make me feel guilty, like I was betraying her. But I stood my ground. I told her that I needed space to think, that I couldn't keep living under her control." I felt a rush of relief wash over me. He was finally seeing through her. He was finally standing up for himself. "Jacob," I said, my voice shaking slightly with emotion, "I'm so proud of you. You did the right thing." He looked up at me then, his eyes softening. "It wasn't easy, Mom, but I know I had to do it. I can't keep pretending everything is okay when it's not." I reached across the table and placed my hand on his. "I know, sweetheart. I know." For a moment, we just sat there in silence, the weight of everything we had been through settling around us. But then Jacob spoke again, his voice more confident this time. "I'm going to talk to her again. I'm going to make it clear that I won't let her control me anymore. I'm not going to let her take over everything, not anymore." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I quickly wiped them away. This wasn't a time for tears, not now. This was the beginning of something better. "You're stronger than you realize, Jacob," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "And you don't have to do this alone. I'm here for you, every step of the way." Jacob smiled, a small but genuine smile. "I know, Mom. I know. And I'm going to fix this. I'm going to fix us." For the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to believe that everything would be okay. We weren't there yet, but we were getting closer. We were on the path to healing, to rebuilding the family that had been torn apart by Rachel's lies. And I knew, no matter what, I wouldn't stop fighting for my son. I wouldn't stop fighting for our family. The days after Jacob's decision were filled with uncertainty, but also with a glimmer of hope. I could feel the shift in the air. Jacob had started to take control of his life, and Rachel's hold over him was beginning to weaken. He was still trying to navigate the waters, but he was no longer the man he had been before. He was stronger now, more aware of the manipulation that had clouded his judgment for so long. I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in him, but I knew there was still much work to be done. I spent those days waiting, watching, and hoping. I knew Rachel wouldn't let go easily. She had already tried so many times to push me out, and now she had lost her grip on Jacob, her greatest ally. I was sure she wouldn't take this defeat lightly. One morning, Jacob called me. His voice was steady, but I could hear the tension underneath. "Mom, I think it's time. I need to talk to Rachel. I've been putting it off for too long, but I can't let her keep controlling everything." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I had been waiting for this moment, but I wasn't sure what would happen once Jacob confronted her. "Are you sure you're ready?" I asked, trying to gauge where his mind was. "I've never been more sure of anything," Jacob replied. "I can't keep living this way, with her making all the decisions for me. It's time to take back control." I took a deep breath. "I'm proud of you, Jacob. No matter what happens, just know that I'm here for you. Always." "Thanks, Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I would have done without you." I could hear the sincerity in his words, and it filled my heart with warmth. I had been waiting for him to reach this point, to realize that he didn't have to be controlled by Rachel anymore, that he could stand up for himself and for our family. That afternoon, I sat in the living room, waiting for Jacob to return. The house felt oddly empty, as if the calm before the storm had settled over it. I couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. My mind raced with thoughts of what could unfold, but I didn't want to get ahead of myself. I had to trust that Jacob was ready, that he had the strength to do what needed to be done. Hours passed, and just as the evening light began to fade, Jacob returned. His face was pale, but there was a sense of resolve in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. He walked in and sat down next to me, his hands shaking slightly. "I did it," he said, his voice quiet. "I told her everything. I told her I couldn't keep living in her shadow, that I needed to make my own decisions. I told her that I was done being controlled." My heart swelled with pride. I reached out and placed my hand on his. And how did she take it? I asked gently, not sure what to expect. Jacob's face darkened as he looked down. She didn't take it well. She tried to guilt-trip me, said I was abandoning her, that I didn't care about her anymore. She even threatened to leave. My chest tightened at his words, but I tried to remain calm. What did you do? I asked, my voice steady. Jacob let out a sigh. I told her I couldn't keep living a lie, that if she really loved me, she would respect my decision. I told her I was done playing along with her games. I squeezed his hand, my heart full. Jacob, I'm so proud of you. You did the right thing. You stood up for yourself, and you didn't let her manipulate you anymore. He smiled weakly, but there was still a look of uncertainty in his eyes. I don't know what's going to happen now, Mom. I don't know if she'll leave, if we'll be able to work things out. I looked at him, my voice soft but firm. Whatever happens, Jacob, I want you to know that you're not alone. We'll get through this together, just like we always have. He nodded slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. Thanks, Mom. I really needed to hear that. I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. We had taken the first step toward healing, toward rebuilding what had been broken. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let Rachel tear my family apart, not without a fight, and I was ready for whatever came next. We would rebuild our family, piece by piece, until we were stronger than ever before.